Good morning, everyone. Today's lesson, number 7, October 18th. God's covenant with present world. And the key verse is Genesis, the 9th chapter, verse 11. It says, "And I will establish my covenant with you, neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood, neither shall there any more be a flood to destroy the earth." This is God's promise to all mankind. And what's interesting to me, and I'm going to start this, is back up to the 8th chapter, verses 20 through 22. It says, and Noah builded an altar unto the Lord, and took every clean beast and every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a sweet savor. And the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more everything living as I have done. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. And so we see here a promise from God of Noah taking, and him and his family coming out of the ark. And so they were to take and come out of that ark with an assurance from God that God was not going to bring this kind of judgment through a flood again. Now, there is going to be a day where God takes and judges the world and judges mankind, and he will take and use fire to judge with. But that is going to be the ultimate judgment that takes place. In the 9th chapter, verses 1 through 17, it says, And God blessed Noah and his sons, and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the air, upon all that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. Even as the green herb have I given you all things, but flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. And surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it, and at the hand of man, and at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man. And you, being fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth, and multiply therein. And God spake unto Noah and to his sons with him, saying, And I, behold, I establish my covenant with you, and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, of the fowl, of the cattle, of every beast, and of the earth with you, from all that go out of the ark to every beast of the earth. And I will establish my covenant with you, neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of the flood, neither shall there any more be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, This is the token of the covenant which I may make between me and you, and every living creature that is with you, for perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant which is between me and you, and every living creature of all flesh. The water shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh, and the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, This is a token of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is upon the earth. And the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham is the father of Canaan. These are the 3 sons of Noah, and of them was the whole earth overspread. And so you look at this passage here, and this is something where you have a contrast of life and death. Life being in the ark, death being out, what was out in the world. You have the receding of the water that's taking place during this time period, and this was, the beginning of a new life. There was no more human beings on the earth anymore, and all that had been swept away. Every single thing that was of life was contained in what it is that God had made a covenant with man, and he kept that covenant through the ark. And so what's interesting is that I like to put myself in present day of when that was taking place, and the seal of the covenant that he was making was his rainbow. And I just think about how, maybe it's just me thinking about this, but you think about how much water is present. I know it's receding, but you think about that, and you think about all the different clouds and rainbows that were in the sky at that moment, that literally when they walked out, what did they see? And I'm thinking to myself, what they saw God's covenant with man of those rainbows. And I don't know if you've ever been in a place where you've seen multiple rainbows, but I remember there's some backpacking trips, and then there's also sometimes in Hawaii where I have seen those rainbows being in multiple locations. 4 is the most that I've ever got up to. But that was pretty spectacular to see that many rainbows in the sky. Just has to be one for you to take and remember God's covenant with mankind. But it also says that he will remember his covenant that he's made with man. The other part of this, God didn't take and just cut Noah and his family off. This is something that they had witnessed. This is something that they lived by faith and built the ark and went through the flood. This is something where they literally, they weren't disconnected from death. They heard it. I'm sure that during this time period, they saw it. It was all over the land as far as bodies. And God didn't take and forsake them. He didn't forsake Noah after the flood. God had led Noah before the flood, and God would provide for Noah now when the waters had receded. And so God's promise to be with man, just if you wrap your mind around looking at the completely being engulfed by the God's love and his grace, and it was his grace that sustained Noah and his family, because if they were outside that ark, they would have been judged just like the rest of mankind would have been. Um, God never changes, but he definitely does change the way he deals with mankind. And, when you look at this passage here, um, in the first chapter, verse 28, he gives a command to Adam and Eve. And in the first chapter, verse 28, it says, "And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and every living thing that moveth upon the earth." And so, you come back over here, and he gives the same command to Noah's family, and that is for them to take and be fruitful and multiply. And it was important for them to take and go about this command from God. But I don't know if you draw from this the importance of life. It is the most precious thing that you have out there is life, and Jesus is life. In the Bible, children are seen as a blessing and never a curse. The family that had many children and even grandchildren was considered blessed by God. Today, it's taken a turn from that to where literally our nation is more known for the killing of life than it is for sustaining it. Life is the gift of God, and children are a heritage and treasure from the Lord. He kept the animals safe in the ark for over a year. And if you look at that, we always think, the 2x2 going into the ark, but the animals that were set apart for sacrifices, there were 7 of those. Not 7 animals, but 7. There was a multiple. They had 7 of each one of those types of animals. They were considered the clean animals versus the unclean animals, and so they were set apart for taking and worshiping the Lord and having a burnt offering and sacrifice. So you see life being given, if you would, a second chance, and the ability for you and I to take and know that when we look at this passage, we know that God took and set it to where man was to have the utilization of all of these animals at his disposal. Now, that isn't to go out and hunt, where you're just hunting to hunt, or sport where you're just doing it for fun. Literally, it's that you're killing for sustainability of your family. Life is important, it's sacred, and God considers it sacred, and not just mankind, but also animals. He considers animals' lives to be something that's whole and something holy. He set it aside for you and I. One of the conclusions that comes out of this is that God says human hearts are evil, so we need help with that. He's given us a regulatory of government. Government needs that ultimate authority to take lives to preserve society. Just think if you leave it up to mankind, Cain and Abel. God was the judge then. So when you think about this passage here, understand that he looked at life and he considered it something that was sacred and holy, and he also gave it to where mankind would look at life in a different way. One in which if you took someone's life, your life was going to be required of you. And it's important for you and I to understand there's some principles that are established here in this 9th chapter that go all the way to today's society. Verse 6, whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man. God considers his image holy, and it is holy, and set apart. But it's something for you and I to look at. You can't just casually take a man's life. It's defense of your family. It's taking in times of war, and that war would actually be something that's means something, and for you and I to understand the importance of when it is, okay for us to shed man's blood. There are times that it's okay to shed man's blood. And the other is in verse 7, it says, and ye, be fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply therein. And so there's a command there for him to take, and for him and his family to go out and start mankind again. And it's interesting between the sons, those who followed after the Lord and those who didn't and followed after things that were of this earth and created their own religions based upon. You got to go back to what took place before they went into the ark, of all the evil, all the things that they had seen and watched themselves, and then what comes out of this and what they practice after this time. There was those who stuck with the Lord and followed after the Lord's practices and laws, and then there was those who went to following after idolatry and witchcraft. And it's something for you and I to look at and know, okay, this was a break in time for us. This chapter begins the blessing from God. In these verses, God specifically established a covenant with Noah and his sons, and through them with the whole human race. Note that this was Noah and his seed after him. This includes everyone who would ever live in the new world. This covenant is not only for people, that is also includes the animals. And so understand, your lineage, it comes from Noah. You're connected, if you would, to one family, and the first family, if you would, after the flood, and the importance of life. When he talks about the rainbow, he talks about this as a token of the covenant in verse 12. And so a token being like an offering or a down payment, if you would. And so it's important for you and I to take note that when we're out and about and you're seeing God's token of his down payment of his promise that he made to mankind, when you see a rainbow, take notice of it. Stop. It's an important thing. It's a moment for you to take and notice that God is giving you an opportunity to see something that's of heaven being given to you. In the 19th chapter, 19th chapter, verse 1, and it says, and there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Psalms 19, verse 1. It's like, that doesn't sound right. Psalms 19, verse 1 says, the heaven declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. And so, you look at God's creation. He is giving mankind another opportunity to take and not stray where it is the heart would lust after, but to follow after God, follow after his command. He was faithful with the promise that he gave to Noah and his family. He was faithful with coming through and doing exactly what it is that he said he would do. He was faithful with taking and keeping that covenant relationship. And so it's important for you and I to understand that when you follow after God, there are blessings that come with that. When you do not follow after God, well, there's consequences that come with that. And for you and I to study through this chapter, the 9th chapter of Genesis, and literally understand the importance of life and how special it is. And, God had set it apart. Also take yourself back to that day, of taking and coming out of the ark and seeing life again. They had their fair share of seeing death, and this was a time for them to come out of that ark and see life, and for them to take and pursue it abundantly. I hope that these words have some place of fitting into your heart. The final word is the words of this covenant are the response of God to the faith of Noah, demonstrated when he made an offering upon leaving the ark. The rainbow is a sign of that covenant. There is a wonderful application we can make from the sign of God's covenant. Many people look at the rainbow and see nothing significant about it at all. They merely regard it as a natural phenomenon that has no further meaning to them. It is pretty, but so what? It teaches us, to me, how far it is that man's heart can take and go away from God. So you guys have a good week. I hope you have a blessed Sunday, and God bless.